Hello again and welcome back. That might have been very loud. Hello again and welcome back to the Power Podcast with me, Joe, some Irish guy called Sam, and maybe
Northern Irish.
Maybe a person called Alex.
Maybe a person.
Maybe,
that is debatable.
Or you might be pigeon. We don't know. I couldn't remember.
I looked down at my wings.
I couldn't remember any of your hats, and I was trying to reference one of your hats, but I couldn't remember what you had.
Yeah, how dare you? First of all, how dare you? I'll have to send you the Google Doc of all of my hats, and then you'll have to memorize them for next time.
There's so many. Right, so this episode we're talking about a power. As we talk about effigy animation, or the power of animation, either one of the two. Here are the rules of this power, since apparently we need these guidelines. Number 1, it has to be an effigy. An effigy is either a statue of a person, or an actual person. Well, no, not a person, sorry. No.
See?
The intro is ruined. Okay, there we go, perfect. Right. An effigy is basically supposed to be an image or a configuration of a person, not an actual person, or a statue. So it can either be a statue or a plasticine mould or basically whatever, but it has to be a 3D object that is similar to a creature or a being. The being has to be relative to an actual concept of something that the usual thing that we would consider as a living creature, but we're actually going to get into exactly what that means. Effigy animation does exactly this. It has to be a statue or a thing of some level of an actual creature. For instance, a plasticine mold of a dog, or a stone statue of a person, or an iron monument that someone has in some kind of park or something. To animate it is basically to make it relatively come to life, or at least allow it to move about as if it were alive. Animation usually takes this power and actually creates its own form of life in the forms of it by allowing things to come to life that aren't just 3D. For instance, there are certain people who can do it from images, people who can do it from videos, and people who can do it through the forms of moulding elements, and suddenly the elements come to life. Today we're going to be talking about that, and just a disclaimer, this is nothing to do with reanimation. We're not going to be talking about resurrecting or reanimating the dead. We're not even going to be talking about bringing any dead things back to life. Sam. So,
hey,
without further
there's
ado,
life.
I will at least explain one particular thing that does not count as animation. In my opinion, and I guess you guys can argue this, but I read up the definition of animation, and this wasn't in it, so here we go. In a show called Naruto, there are people who have these strings made out of energy. When the strings attach to puppets, they can then control them like a real puppet. This is not animation because they are constantly manipulating this object rather than bringing it to life or letting it have a level of anonymity. Well, not anonymity. What is it? Autonomy. That's it.
It's an automaton.
Autonomy. Yes. Also, robots don't count unless specifically your ability is bringing the robot to autonomy, function, or life without any of the circuitry being activated. So, sorry, but if you did it without any superpowers, it doesn't count. Those are just two explanations. And to be fair, this isn't going to be a reference-heavy one like the last couple of episodes, because this is actually going to be talking about the power. But to help people, we're going to have a couple of examples. Alex, do you have one, since I'm assuming that you do?
Puppet Master.
How does it work?
Puppet Master. Just a bit. I'm just going on like the first movie because they basically changed the continuity of how it works, like every movie that they do. But the basic idea is that it is a psychic technique that's kind of considered a form of alchemy or just magic, but it's essentially a superpower like the rest of the psychics in the film.
Right.
Where you have like a certain amount of ability, and it's a technique you can learn to bring life to, in this case, puppets. But you can also like you can adapt it from things like putting yourself in the body of a puppet or even a dead caviter, but it's not like really animate reanimation. It's just you are putting yourself in a puppet and piloting it like a mech. But
Okay.
in the case of the main puppets, you give them a certain amount of life and they have autonomy, so much so that they can betray their master. That's just generally a thing that they do. Like if you treat them, as disposable toys rather than autonomous, beings, they can just turn on you for murder
They have their own
if you want. So
personalities.
you have, yeah, they have their own personalities, and they have their own loyalties as well. Like they can betray you, or go with you depending on how they, on their own want.
Okay.
And like you can just give them like instructions like kill these people. Like you don't have to like give them a straightforward plan. They can work it out themselves. They have their own strategy as well, which is kind of cool. And yeah, they're just adorable, and I love them.
You've been
These little
waiting to
murder
use this
machines.
since like what, 3 months ago? No, no,
Yeah,
3 weeks ago. Sorry.
it is. I know. I'm super into Puppet Master now. I'm like, it's weird because effigy animation was sort of like a power that I slept on for a while until I got into the Puppet Master series, and I'm like, yeah, this is so cheesy and wonderful, and all of the puppets are really got really cool designs, and they're my babies. So
Mention six
yeah,
shooter,
all right.
the best puppet.
Yes.
I was gonna say I would actually definitely count that as one of the top tier ones, because that not only are you saying that they bring them to life almost quite literally, they have their own personalities, almost like as if they have their own souls, their own levels of intelligence, and they can turn against their master, but also the user can also possess these puppets, or at least possess a puppet or possess dead bodies. And although yes, that's not what we're talking about, that's a definite additional power that we will get into later, which is effigy possession, or possession animation, or animation possession. Anyway, so Sam, do you have one?
Do you want to go first, and then I'll
Do I want to
say
go
my one.
first? Well, I have my one, which is Black Bison from the TV show Flash or from the DC comics, where their power is literally they imbue something with telekinetic / telepathic energy, and temporarily it moves on its own and does exactly as the user commands. It's only within a specific range, however, and she has to focus on what exactly she wants to control. She at least has to know that it's within the room and look at it once. As long as she sees and knows it, she can then basically look at it, focus on it, and it can move of its own capabilities. And they don't seem to be able to, well, disobey her. They have the semi level of flexibility and maneuverability of whatever particular creature it's supposed to be based and shaped on, and it has the tensile physical strength and capabilities as whatever it's made out of. For instance, at one point, there's an actual metal statue of a jaguar that kills someone, and they say the only thing that could actually have blown a person's head completely to the point of which it was squashed like a melon is if it had the same level of strength as a jaguar made of bronze, as they're cleaning the blood out of the mouth of the bronze jaguar.
Ooh.
So there's all sorts of different ways that she uses this. At one point, there's an eagle that is made out of metal that she controls, and it flies. So, again, pinch of salt needs to be taken with exactly the reality of how easily she is able to control these things, and how they're not seeming to be able to be affected by certain forms of the laws of physics. But either way, it's a power nonetheless that is very useful, usable, and interesting. So much so that we actually adapted it into Animite Tales. Sam, what is yours?
Yes. I have maybe two. Considering you said it has to actually be a physical object, that removes the one I was actually going to say.
Right.
Considering I was going to mention the one from Infamous 2. So now I have to mention one of two. One of them I'm not sure. One of them I think it is.
Okay, well, why don't you bring why don't you bring us the first one, and then we'll debate on it.
Master Hand from the Super Smash Brothers series.
Right.
More or less, it is, considering the first game, the actual characters are more or less just statuettes that fight for its amusement after he makes them become animate.
Yeah, no, I'll allow it. Yeah.
If you ever played the game, you see like the opening cutscene is just them being like toys.
I've seen
and then they suddenly
Subspace.
begin moving.
I've seen the Subspace Emissary from Smash Brothers Brawl, so I do know what you mean. And yeah, I did hear about the whole thing of the two hands are actually like either a puppet master, a controller, or an actual like kid just playing about with toys.
With his toys.
Yeah. So yeah, no,
and the other one is from a quite underrated movie. The film, I don't know if have you ever seen the film 9?
Yes, yes, with the little ragdoll things that have like a fraction of the creator's soul in it.
Yes.
I'd say yes. It's animation with sacrifice.
Because there is no, as we see, considering he opens up his chest at one point, there is no actual like mechanisms inside them.
Yeah, they're just rag things.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And also, it's as I said, it's an animation with a sacrifice. The person gives up parts of his soul, and they seem to have their own personalities hidden within that soul, because when they die, their little souls come out of them. So
I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was like different aspects of his soul.
Yes, yeah.
Like they're all different. Like I think the first one he gave away was like maturity or some crap, which is why the first one is like the leader and is old, even though he's not that, even though he's just a sackcloth.
Yeah, no, I like that. All right, no, those were actually really good. So we've got a rough basis, making inanimate or relatively inanimate creatures or not creatures, bloody hell, objects turn into semi-living or at least kind of moving and autonomous creatures. So now we'll actually dive into animation itself. Now, animation doesn't necessarily need to be based on an effigy. It doesn't need to have an actual statue to make it come to life. But it can make things come to life so long as there's a relative shape, or sometimes it can just make an object come to life. Kind of like a bunch of books flying off out of the bookcases and opening and closing very fast to be like flapping creatures that then smash into you. And they're like sentient books that flap around.
Hold the phone. Does that mean that Frosty the Snowman counts?
Technically, yes.
Oh my god!
He is snow, and then he's alive, and then when the thing is off, he is then not alive. Bless you.
Isn't it?
So I was actually going to say, like, this power is one of my favourites. Bill and I like worked on it a while in Animite Tales to make it work relative to it, and obviously we had to have the limitation of you can't make anything come to life. You can only make statues come to life. Or at least things that are within the shape of creatures made out of non-living materials, such as like, I don't know, like a what was it? A wax model of like a hero, or a doll entirely made out of clay, or a puppet,
or a chocolate man,
or a chocolate man. Yes, exactly. Yes, and there's many different things that can happen from this, and animation is brilliant because depending on the situation, you can make all sorts of different weird and wacky culminations. In the effigy animation thing, if you get what's known as a golem heart, you can actually install it into normally non-solids. Like for instance, you could throw it into fire, or throw it into water, or liquid chocolate, and when you activate your powers on it and throw the golem heart into it, it basically is a piece of your power. It goes into it, and that becomes its actual core, like its heart, and it then forms the shape of a humanoid, or forms the shape of some kind of living creature to fit within that confines of the power. And it's funny that you brought up Frosty the Snowman, because Here's exactly where we got the golem hearts from.
No way!
Yes, golem hearts are objects that are infused with the user's power, and when placed into, onto, or around a creature or an object that is going to be brought to life using effigy animation, it needs that to survive. If it's wrenched out of it or destroyed, it no longer is able to live, and it can't sustain itself, either turning back into a statue or basically turning back into the original form that it was. For instance, poor old water creature over here would suddenly just become water that just flops to the ground rather than looking like a human or a large golem or whatever. And the same with earth or chocolate, or even a statue would just go back to its rigidity and just not be able to move. And that's exactly where we got it from. And we had tons of different ones like marbles and ball bearings, swords that you'd stab into the ground and suddenly it'd be like a large creature that had like a sword sticking out of it. Or clothing, like a scarf that someone would then wrap around a statue, and then the statue would come to life, but it would have the scarf. As soon as the scarf is removed, the statue would then just die, or at least just be de-animated.
Oh, that's so good. I can't believe you got in a Frosty reference.
Yep, absolutely.
In the game, I was just being goofy, but like
that's why
how
he
it
counts.
happened. Oh my god, my mind is actually blown right now. This is new. Oh, I mean, that is kind of cool. That is kind of cool though. Like, you know, that you even have that in the game. It's sort of like you've got that sort of like role play element where you've got like you can just like put a scarf. You can literally just like you know, draw like, you know, a human, as long as it's got a human shape to it, then you can do it. Or just like, you know, within your mind, as long as you've got that human shape in your mind and in your powers, you can do it. So the possibilities are just expanded so much from that.
Even more so if it's even a statue of a creature that you've seen before, or even it's relatively a shape of something that your mind knows how it would relatively move and function. You can also bring that to life. For instance, if it was a crab, or you know, like, well, for instance, a statue or a little plasticine crab, or for instance, it was like a 3D you know, third-dimensional origami swan, or, you know, anything like that. If it's in the shape of something, like you could make, I don't know, your pop vinyls come to life with this power. There's all sorts of different things that you could do with effigy animation. But with animation, you could make almost anything come to life, as long as you could picture roughly how it would physically move around. Even if it's only like a basic 1-2 movement, even if it's just the same cycling movement, you could figure it out. This is not to be confused, however, with another ability, which is granting life to creatures by technically transforming them. For instance, turning an ordinary chest into a mimic by basically having teeth and a mouth and organs and legs. Or the quite common one, which is anything that when opens up, it opens up just a row of teeth, is the most common one. But adding things with legs, or even turning something into a creature, that isn't a form of animation if it's a completely new creature, like turning, I don't know, a phone, and the phone suddenly turns into a dove and flies away. That's transmogrification, or polymorphism. However...
Just because I brought up Power Rangers.
Yes and no. I actually wanted to bring this up because I was asked by my cousin, like, are you going to bring up the fact that Giorno Giovanna, a character from JoJo's, has the ability to turn objects into relatively like organic and living creatures. For instance, at one point, he turns this girl's money into butterflies, and then they fly out of her wallet, and they land on his shoulder. He touches the butterflies, and then they turn back into the money, and he's now got cash for himself. Another point, he basically turns a flooring tile, like a patio tile, into a tree so that it can grow underneath him, so that he can basically get onto the top of a roof. There's all sorts of different ways, but that's polymorphism rather than animation. It's not making it come to life, but you can make living things out of them. But again, they can turn back into the original object. So again, that's not really what we're talking about. But what we are talking about is giving relative level of life to something. But it has to keep its original material or design, one of the two.
It's not transmogrifying it, it's just giving life to it. A certain form of sentience, yeah.
Kind of almost like I guess if you were to do this with animation, the best you could possibly do is force at least one ligament or body part or feature onto it. Kind of like almost like the paving slab from Doctor Who.
Ugh.
Creepy. But yes, there's a ton of different ones that you can actually do. I quite like this power. I have a lot of interest, but I was wondering if there was anything that you guys wanted to add to this, because I know that you personally, Alex, really pushed for this.
I know. I mean, I love it. You see, it's weird because I did. It's not that I disliked it before. I actually love it. I think like Jeremiah was one of the best characters that was created under the system, and that got me interested. And I was just kind of thinking, well, actually, there is one kind of thing about it. Like, I rarely see effigy animation like done, but usually it's done via villains. It's really like, is this a power that's like kind of tropey in terms of like it's seen as like inherently sort of a creepy power because it like it sort of preys on the things of like things that shouldn't be coming to life are coming to life, and they're like essentially your minions and stuff.
I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think, Sam? Have you seen anyone using this power more villainously than good, or?
Well, mostly, yeah. I've not really seen many good people use it.
I have to agree with you.
Mostly because it
Jeremiah.
is. Mostly because it's usually used in like movies. Whenever it is used, it's usually used as a way to give the hero something he can just destroy without feeling bad about. Because he's not hurting people; he's hurting puppets.
Oh, see, it's so weird because with the Puppet Master thing, it's sort of like, again, the continuity does not matter, but it's like they kind of like flip that trip because they are horror movies and they are killer puppets, but at the same time, they are the good guys in a lot of movies because they're just they're just under they're just under the influence of someone bad, and like they don't actually have that evil intent within them, but the people really, in fact, their original creator Toulon, for the most part, is a really nice person and considers his puppets his children, like little extensions of himself, like a parent would. Which, yeah, and he isn't a bad guy. It's just, well, he's actually a good guy for most of it. Give or take a few movies where he's not a good guy, and they just like say, well, he's evil again because the plot requires him.
Still,
to be evil.
though, like my particular reference is actually a bad guy. Black Bison is actually a bad guy in the Flash TV show. I don't know about the comics, but I'm pretty sure they're a bad guy. Well, I guess you could say bad girl / villain, because in the Flash, the Black Bison was a woman. I think Black Bison is a woman in the comics as well, but I can't fully remember.
Nine is used for good, I think. Somewhat.
I wouldn't know about Master Hand because they're creating life to basically have playthings, but the other one, I think it's neutral. I don't think it's necessarily good, but I think it's neutral in 9.
The only one I can really think of that's definitely good is Frosty, but this example that Sam gave. I mean, so it's like,
yeah,
I can't think of one. Maybe.
Go on.
Maybe Wonder Woman, like her origin story, being shaped from clay.
That's true, but it's again more polymorphism because she isn't made of clay anymore. It's literally a god giving it life and actually making it into something rather than just like it's she's not made of clay. She doesn't, like, if she gets cut, she still bleeds. She has organs.
I would read the hell out of that comic though, where Wonder Woman is just a clay woman. Like, and that's the reason why she's immortal, because she's made out of clay and she's just an effigy reanimated.
See, that would be
Get on it, DC.
Now, I think we need to go to the next point, which is actually where we're going to talk about one particular thing, which is actually probably the trickiest part: effigy possession or animation possession, which is basically it's the same thing as all what we've been talking about, but instead the user's mind is planted into it. Now, this can sometimes be a psychic ability where a person actually becomes the software and transfers their consciousness over to a robot or over to a computer or whatever. But sometimes they use it to transfer their mind over to another body. Sometimes it's used for the sake of putting it into a cadaver or putting it into an object so that it can see through the eyes of the object. And sometimes it's actually just kind of almost like demon possessing objects, like for instance, like sort of like Annabelle or stuff like that. So again, I think you're right, Alex. I think you are onto something. It is a majority that is kind of like these kind of abilities are relatively villainous.
It's just got that creep factor in it. I think that's why. I mean, it's not necessarily a inherently evil power, but it's like it can easily be intimidating to people, just much like decay. It's like everybody, has a basic fear of like having, their body decay, and it's like everyone has that fear of like something is lurking in the room, like something that is dead and has no capability of life suddenly comes to life, and oh no, it can wield a weapon, or it can just smother you in the night. And I think that's might be where it comes from.
I think something about any and all of your objects becoming semi-sentient or actually being able to like be able to kill you is rather terrifying. But I still would argue that it's a power that at least has a source. Like if it's just the world bringing things to life randomly, then of course it's terrifying because you don't know when your number will be up. You don't know if your pillow's going to smother you at night, or your TV's just suddenly going to make a flashbang out of itself, or your microwave's suddenly going to just like explode and kill you. You never really know. Whereas like if it's a person who can control it, and you know of their powers, it suddenly has less of a random possibility and more of like a murderous intent vibe. Like it's like, okay, so rather than like we don't know what's going to happen, it's more now we just have to look out for this guy, or we have to look out for this person, or we have to look out for any telltale signs of this particular thing happening. If we survive it, we know who's just done this. Whereas if the world has it, you're like, well, that's another duvet out. Anyway, right, we might as well continue on with our lives. So I guess with effigy animation or animation in general, it does lose a bit of something if you're in a world with power users because of that. I mean, obviously not all powers are going to be able to defend against an army of 6 fairly well-trained effigies made out of frickin' steel, but some might. So,
I mean, it's back to the whole like evil Nintendo Puppet Master thing. The thing is that these little beings that you create, and they are essentially beings. I personally find them rather cute because they're so small. It's hard not to find something that small adorable, even if they are like shaped like monsters. And it's like you can't, because they're everything. They're not just truly controlled entirely by their master. You can reason with them. And you can form a friendship with them, like unless it's basically it's on their time. You can get out of it by actually appealing to them and convincing them that their master doesn't have their best interests.
okay.
Of course, it's entirely up to them, which is another creepy idea because they can just decide, and you have no control over it whatsoever, which is a kind of scary thing. But also, it gives them leeway to be good and to be not just, ironically, not just puppets of the people that created them.
Well, this is kind of where we sort of go into the next part of the section, which is where we actually talk about stuff to do with anime tales. Now, obviously we've already said that this power is existent, so we might as well just relatively say roughly what it does. The user can control any particular effigy or any particular statue of a creature, or at least that they can envision moving or coming to life in some way, shape, or form. Has to be in the shape of something that they have either seen that can move, or they know exactly roughly how it can move. So, for instance, if it's a humanoid or if it's an animal-shaped object, then they can make it come to life. Depending on its size will depend on the difficulty of the roll, and depending on the material can also depend on how much strength or health it may or may not get. They also will potentially have weaknesses based on potential materials. For instance, if you make it out of wax, it's going to take more damage from fire. There's also the possibility of there's also the possibility of other people getting special abilities and special effects, like being able to see through their eyes, hearing through their hearing through their non-existent ears, and even like after they die, knowing what happened to them and knowing how they died, to even having it where, as I said with the golem hearts thing, you place an object in or on them and they have that to like revive or revitalize them to give them a bit more extra health. But we have this thing known as effigy health, which is kind of similar to temporary hit points, where if, say, for instance, the object is made out of steel. Now, if you hit this thing a multitude of times and still don't break the steel, that's fine, because what's known as effigy health will eventually diminish. But that does mean that if the character is able to touch it or manipulate it again, they can just make it come back and it'll have its original health that it had, when you bring it back, because it's technically a new creature. We have two things that are very important with this. We have what's known as golems and effigies. Effigies are basically, they are controlled by their master in almost every single form. If the master is knocked unconscious or nullified, they also deactivate. Golems are a little different. They have a little bit more health, and they have a relative amount of being able to answer their master and actually speak back, and they can have a memory. They don't necessarily have any emotions or any particular orders, unless if their creator orders them to do something. Even if their creator is nullified or knocked out, they can still move around and do as they wish, but they cannot disobey their master. And finally, there's the final ability called the Arbiter Doll. Pretty much the exact same as golems. You need a golem heart to actually have these. They have a little bit more health than golems, and you can only have one. The Arbiter Doll, however, can have an entire load of personality traits. They can even have specific amounts of capabilities, and they can even level up on those traits and proficiencies. Basically, you've now created a new form of life. And thanks to the ability of the user having the ability of effigy animation, they can keep topping them off with effigy health every now and again. So there's a ton of different things. And even funnier, the Arbiter Doll can actually turn against its master because it has its own personality. However, the master can at any point deactivate them so long as they can actually land a touch on them and are able to roll the SP requirement. So, we've got all that, and the last abilities of those are, as I said, reanimation and effigy possession. Reanimation is only for the dead, so basically you lose your ability to summon or control effigies and statues, but again, you have the ability to raise the dead, so that's pretty good. And effigy possession is your mind can be placed into these objects, and you can be the one who controls the body made of metal. So, is there any particular thing that you guys feel that should be brought up in here? Is there anything that you'd like to discuss on this, now that I've sort of laid all this out?
Actually, there is one thing. If a Arbiter Doll was to go against their master and kill their master, would they still exist, or would they die with the power?
Now I'm glad that you brought this up, because there's two possibilities. If their master hasn't gotten to level 10, there is a possibility of this particular thing happening, which is if they die, the Arbiter Doll is able to stay alive and basically just be its own thing until eventually it is killed off, or who knows what, or even its body starts failing it. However, if the master had effigy possession, they can roll a specific roll, and since the effigy heart is made out of a small amount of their blood or DNA, it basically ties them together, meaning that if the Arbiter Doll kills their master, the master will then possess the body of the Arbiter Doll and become the new Arbiter Doll. In other words, basically possessing the creature and erasing anything of the original creature's personality. On top of this, the powers are removed from the originator's body and placed into the effigy heart as a true power stone.
Oh. Now that's interesting. I mean, I'm glad that you did have a ready answer for that, because I thought, oh, maybe a new was like, oh, because yeah, I mean, in a way, that's kind of undefeatable, isn't it? Because the Arbiter Doll, for whatever reason, could kill the Master, but then the Master can still win if they're the right level, and just like, well, you kill me, I'm just going to take over your body.
That's why 10th level powers are so very good, because there's at least one way that you can outmatch other people with the same powers as you.
God, that'd be so strange as well. I mean, it still wouldn't be, ideal, because you're in this new body. It may be a very powerful body, sure, but you're not in your original body, and that can have its own problems. And you are essentially
feel, and yet technically you also can. Like, you can't feel pain or anything like that, but your body will eventually break down depending on what materials you're made out of. Not to forget that you'll basically you deactivate and you fall unconscious if your effigy health is gone, because that's that. But if your body is destroyed, or if your effigy heart is removed, your personality is basically saved into that, unless, and here's the crazy bit, the stone is destroyed, or the effigy heart is eventually, if it's a power stone, is absorbed into another person and they become an effigy animator. Then your personality is completely overwritten, and potentially either your soul is gone or destroyed, because we have not confirmed that yet. A price for immortality, a price for everything.
It's like that is just sort of like, wow. Wow, that's actually quite a lot to take in, to be honest. It's like, what's a fate that's worse than death? Like, just sort of being in in a hollow shell, and then having that soul removed from that shell and crushed like a Coke can.
I mean, imagine it that you make a puppet, and then like the effigy heart is in the head, and they are able to somehow take the head off, and they just put it on a shelf for the rest of eternity. You can't go to sleep. You can't sleep. You can't eat. You can't do anything except from just sit there and stare at whatever they've made you to stare at. So, sorry, Sam, what were you going to say?
Just going on about robot toilets. So you're put into one of those robot toilets and you become the robot.
Mostly because they actually do this in Shadowrun, where they remove your conscious from your body and put it into inanimate objects, such as like forever you will be conscious inside a paper shredder, or like a toaster, or things like that.
It's like, kill me. Just kill me. It would have been better just to erase me from existence. You gave me this.
They did a great episode, I think, of like Black Mirror once, where they put a woman's consciousness inside a teddy bear.
Oh my gosh, no, that was awful. Oh, that was one of the only 2 episodes I ever saw.
I only say like 2 things. I think it was, I love you and I want a hug.
Yeah, that's it. It goes, monkey loves you and monkey wants a hug, and it was like, those are the only 2 things it could say, and that's horrible.
Yes, that is a horrible thing to have.
Jeez.
Hey, I made Joe feel unhappy.
After that episode, I remember like she burns the entire place down, and the only thing that she takes is the monkey. And after she's burned it down and she walks out, she gets in the car, and the monkey goes, "Monkey loves you." And that's the only thing, and it's like, oh, that's really kind of sad and dark, but well, at least it worked. But yeah, no. Oh, damn it, Sam! Now I've got like PTSD.
I mean, if you want, they have done worse. in that. They did.
Oh, I know
they
they've done worse. I know
They
they
did one
have.
like the Christmas episode where it turns out they can like digitize your consciousness, and put you inside more or less like an Alexa that controls your house. And it like they can change time, so what may feel like seconds for us feels like a millennia for the person inside, and they
Jeez.
can't die.
What if you effigy animate an entire house and stuff? Like you essentially
Monster
create a haunted
House.
house. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, that's different because it's like literally a ghost possessing a house,
I mean,
but
the problem
Still.
is with effigy animation is that a house isn't an effigy unless if the house was actually in the shape of a person or an actual statue. Kind of more like if you if you lived in like the Statue of Liberty, basically, and you went into the
Ghostbusters
Statue of
2.
Liberty, or particularly if you wanted to have it with a house, you'd probably have to either have a unique attribute or actually have it that like a lot of it was infused with effigy hearts. And then I don't know, you built stuff in and around it so that then like it could have legs, or
I mean,
something
it
like
could
that.
literally be like the Amityville house where you just like put the windows so it's got like two eyes, as windows, and the mouth is a door,
I mean, yeah, you wouldn't be
and
able to
etc.
move, but yes, you could. Yeah, you could be a sentient house at that point. Um, but yeah, that's terrifying. That is honestly terrifying. The different ways that that you could do it. Okay, here's one then, and I'll have to just quickly go downstairs. So I'll ask you this, and then I'll see what you guys come up with in a few minutes. Because I just realised I left a candle on downstairs, and I want to make sure that I
Oh
don't
no.
end up in like
Oh,
some kind of like, and here's what happened to him story. So I'm gonna say this, and then I'll go downstairs real quick just to blow
Yeah.
out.
Monkey loves you.
Um,
is it a DOE advert?
what power do you think that would be good to put with effigy animation? Now I'll let you two have a discussion whilst I go downstairs.
Ah, damn. That's quite a tricky one because it's good on its own. That's the thing.
Oh,
I
I know what
guess.
it is. I
What?
know what. Either structure or chemistry manipulation.
Oh
Because
yeah,
then
because
you
you
can
could
make
just click
puppets
them.
instantly.
That is
With
true.
chemistry manipulation, you can make a puppet instantly out of almost anything you want. So if you wanted to, you could have more or less a puppet made of adamantium walking
Or you,
about.
or you could like
Or
just like any sort of material at all. You
yeah.
could have like with special effects and everything.
Whereas if you do structure, you could have one the size of like the Statue of Liberty. You could make the Statue of Liberty made out of any material that is about, which most likely would just be a rock figurine of the Statue of Liberty.
I would go a different route actually. I would go nature manipulation because then you could create ents. And they're huge. And also, like, even though, like, chemistry manipulation, depending on your skills, you can get like, materials from anywhere. Like, this is like a living thing as well. You could use like things around you. So if you don't even if you don't have like a very high level, like you don't have all of the things, you can still like, shape your surroundings around you. Like you could literally create a table. Like if you have like chloromancy, you could like animate the table into a person, and you could have table man. You can have an entire furniture store attacking a town.
Are
So
you
In an
saying?
instant.
so I'm now
Are you
back.
saying you are?
So
Are you,
what
are,
what is this for? What is this
are you?
combination with?
Are you saying you want more or less to be the Sorcerer's Apprentice with just the wee brooms dancing
Yes,
about?
yes. Like if you have chloromancy and stuff, you could do that. Like you could just like just like vaguely like grow them into like people shapes, and there you go. An entire furniture store are now trans is now transformed into your army.
So are you saying
But
like,
my one.
are you saying nature manipulation with that? Or
Yeah, I'm saying nature manipulation, and Sam is saying chemistry manipulation or structure.
I will agree
Yes,
with both of those, but go on, Sam.
because then you can, as I said to the viewers, you can just make. If you use chemistry manipulation, you can make them out of almost anything, even just and like instantly. So you could just have an army of adamantium, like wee soldiers, or like as Alex did, like give me the idea actually of like you could have with like special effects like fire ones or plasmid ones or plasma ones or like ones made of animite. Whereas if you have structure, you could go for the giant sized ones, like
That is
Statue of
true.
Liberty sized, or
Oh no, have I
you know,
given you
like giant
both
size.
two ideas?
Yeah, well, I mean, we did actually discuss this a while back. The possibility of, I think, a one shot or just like a creative exercise where we have like effigy squad, where we
Hmm.
all like create like our own sort of
Like an
spins
RTS
on
sort
effigy.
of thing.
Yeah, and it was just like, yeah, it's like like what's it, Fire Force or something, that anime where they have like different abilities on like pyromancy. It's like that, but for
Yes.
effigy animation, and it is just fun to come up with stuff like that. I think we also had one where it was like it was sort of like, sort of a telekinetic thing as well. Like you sort of have like technomancy, so you could like essentially like create robots and be inside robots as well, while also like animating them as their own autonomous robots
Mm.
with their own consciousness. That would be another one that would be kind of cool.
I'd say one that I think is actually a pretty damn good one, which actually possibly makes it doesn't make it often enough, which is since Sam had two, I'll throw these two out. But basically, the most over the top one, which is really ridiculously annoying, is intangibility. Because you could just phase through everything, animate your different effigies, and then basically, if any enemy wants to fight you, you're just like, yeah, I'm not the person that you're supposed to be fighting. And even when you beat all of these things up, if you have any left, or if they didn't destroy them, you can just reanimate them and keep going until eventually it's just a war of attrition. It's the perfect escape power to leave off your minions and run away, because unlike almost every other power in the game, it has zero range problems. Because once you've made them, you can then leave them. They can be any amount of distance away from you, and they can fight on their own. Well, if they're golems, if they're effigies, they have a certain range before eventually they deactivate. But either way, it's still very very useful. And the other one is healing factor, because if you were able to make yourself semi-immortal, that would be ridiculous. And then just the perfect villain or the perfect hero, because it's that thing of, oh no, he's dead, or finally he's dead, immediately stopped by, or later stopped by, depending on the situation. Wait a minute, why does that random robot or random doll have the same voice and personality as it can't be, it is B, and then just possessing this like random statue. And I think that'd just be so cool. It's like, oh man, we couldn't kill him before, and finally his last ditch effort was to make a puppet version of him. It's like that literal last ditch effort to survive, either for the sake of evil or for the sake of good. And either way, I just think it's really cool, because imagine if Wolverine, after like however many hundreds of years that he survived, and then you finally frickin' kill him, and then he just possesses the nearest statue, and it just so happens to be like, I don't know, one covered in like weapons or armor, or I don't know, possesses one of like Tony Stark's Iron Man suits or something. Like, that's just gonna be so annoying. Like, oh, finally we kill. Oh, come on! Like, I don't know. I just think it's funny.
Realized another good one. It just came to my mind there. Would be a good one.
Go on.
Would be telepathy.
Well, yeah.
Because then more or less you've got a walking army of radio receivers that you can just send across. You more or less just sit down and then you just broadcast through them.
I mean, yeah, you could brainwash people, and then you could also like have like your effigy army. It's like you have
My God.
people as well as
like,
objects.
I mean, like more or less just send them out and use them as like your, like, say you wanted to like rule the world ones, you could send them out, just more or less have them be radio receivers for your mental commands.
Oh my God, that would be so evil as well. Like if you could create effigies that looked exactly like human beings, like nobody would know who to attack, because you could essentially just take some hostages And like you have them in with the effigy puppets as well, and they're like, yeah, you can destroy my effigy puppets, but you might be killing one of the hostages too that I've brainwashed. You know,
That is
so
actually pretty.
be
Yeah, that is
careful.
actually pretty damn
Yeah.
cool. I mean, another one is also like if you had like a bunch of suits of armor or power armor or costumes, and some of them had people inside that were brainwashed, and some of them were just sentient costume slash sentient power armor. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference if either all of them could talk or none of them could. Because then you would be like, well, if I destroy the armor, like that would be fine. But if I accidentally hurt the person inside, I could be killing them. Or obviously, like I might just be destroying just inanimate stuff. That either way, like there's a ton of different ways that telepathy could be used for it, and it's really scary. I think another one, which in all honesty is kind of like the super obvious boring one, which is just like basically you could just have it that you have some very very good physical prowess power, like either super strength or super dexterity, and just have it that, oh, I'm really powerful, plus I'm going to make all these statues fight alongside me as we basically just like bully whoever it is into submission. I feel like that's kind of boring, but still very effective, because oh yeah, we kind of almost want to be fighting the statues because at least they don't have this level of speed or strength.
Also, it's like if you have like super speed or something or teleportation, like the tactile nature of the power doesn't matter. Like you can just zip over to a thing to actually possess and then just touch it and then zip back again. And then boom, you're done. You're done. That's all done. Now you got that to deal with.
Damn it, that is actually a really good point as well. That's actually really good. There are so many good combinations. I mean, obviously, the ones that you guys said, I mean, you could also say hydro or terrakinesis. Because obviously, just making...
What if... Sorry, I just realized, could you make your automatons make other automatons if you had them with chemistry manipulation?
No, not unless if they have golem hearts that are also power stones, like legendary imbued golem hearts, and you also then had the ability stone powered, which allows them to activate a legendary object or a power stone that's within their body somewhere.
So it'd be somewhat difficult.
It would be really difficult. It would be relatively difficult, but it is still possible. However, there is a finite amount of effigies that you can actually animate, and even though that your minions, your golems, can actually animate others, including your arbiter doll, you still have a finite amount of puppets that you can actually make. Your arbiter doll, on the other hand, actually can command any of your other subordinates, and so can your golems. However, since your arbiter doll can actually potentially break free and do as and what they please, there is a possibility that you might be fighting your own army one day. Although, again, deactivate it and tell all of them to stop being so silly, and, well, they have no other choice because they don't have a secondary commander anymore. Again, that's if you ever go for arbiter doll, because, again, arbiter doll is pretty good, but it also has a couple of downsides.
Yeah, it's so difficult because like I'm hoping to build a sort of an effigy animation character in the future. I've made no secret of this, but it's like, yeah, I'm just sort of thinking I just sort of think to myself, do I want Arbiter Doll? Because just for story reasons, pretty much, because of like the nature of the power, that sort of like brings an element of ethics into it and a sort of an extra added layer to it
Yeah.
that I'm really interested in. But like you said, strategy wise, not good to have an argument with your minions on the battlefield.
No. That's if someone turns them against you, because again, they have their own level of willpower, intelligence, and charisma and stuff. So again, someone might try it and get squashed by a metal foot. I think that's pretty much it. I think we've pretty much covered everything that we needed to talk about on this particular subject. Unless if anyone else has anything else to say.
No, I think that's it.
Sam?
I think.
Okay.
Sam.
Hello?
Yeah, no,
Hello?
we're here.
Do you hear me?
I mean, oh yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
Ah.
Well, I've got Puppet Master out of my
Um,
system for now, so I think I'll be all right.
what would it be to do the one with the television? Would it be space?
Well, technically, it's funny that you bring this up because are they being pulled out of their own reality, or are they creatures that are being sort of made alive when they are pulled out of the frame?
I mean, they come out as I don't really know. I should
Like
say
when
it's
they
never
come out, are they
explained. He
confused
just
about
gets
their
TV powers.
surroundings?
No.
Are they made out of Are they made out of like the real material, or are they made out of like I don't know, like energy because they came out of a television or something? Like are they made out of light?
Energy, I believe. I think it's just energy.
I'd still say that that's an animation. It's just a different classification of it. I still think that's effigy animation. It's just instead of a 3D, it's 2D to 3D. Because again, for Naruto, there's actually a character that has one where he paints things or he draws things with basic ink, and then they come to life as 3D creatures. So yeah, I'd say so. Also, there is a character who also makes clay dolls that then become semi-alive and then explode because they're made out of like C4 clay or whatever. I don't understand it, but yeah, I'd say so.
Don't understand any of it.
Either way, I hope that you guys enjoyed this, and I hope you at home also enjoyed this. Thank you very much for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please check out our Patreon at the Animite Tales and at the Baitarians, as we are currently making a tabletop RPG. That's right, a tabletop RPG called the Animite Tales. We also do streams every other Sunday, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. UK, which I believe is GMT. No, it's BMT or BST at the moment. British Summertime. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, that's what it is. Anyway, but if you guys would actually like to have a look at that, definitely check us out. And of course, we will be back next week to see exactly what kind of thing that we'll talk about on this podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to us talk. And, well, I don't really know what we'll do for next week.
Maybe suggest some things in the comments.
Good suggestion there, Alex. Well, thank you very much, guys. Have a good night. Goodbye.
Bye.
See you in the future.
Ciao, ciao. For now.